Future-Proof is sponsored by Equipping Young Adults for Life, inspiring student resilience, championing hope. Hello and welcome to Future-Proof. Thank you so much for joining me, Sarah Hopwood, as I continue this whole series for looking specifically at education. And we're back in the studio full because a lot of it has been filmed, certainly recently, just me on my own. And I'm delighted to say, still with the meter distancing, but I have a guest with me. And what a guest he is. I think you're going to thoroughly enjoy his content. His name is Andrew Wright, and he is from Action Your Potential. This is a relatively new business that specifically focuses on helping education. So I hope that you enjoy hearing all Andrew has to say as he shares his nuggets of gold. Andrew, thank you so much for joining me.
It's lovely for you inviting me, thank you.
It's really good. Now, we met recently, didn't we? Now, it was a Zoom meeting, a business meeting by Mike Ogilvy, and you were presenting. Can I ask, have you known Mike years? How did you get that gig?
No, it's very interesting. So Mike is my accountant, or his company is my accountant. So 18 months I've known Mike, and I've done a couple of those business breakfasts, he calls them, and it's really interesting. I've learnt so much because I've been in education all my life, and I've only just become a proper person and run my own business. And so going to those meetings, I learn a huge amount, and I've contributed to them as well now.
And your contribution I found amazing. We've already said there is so much like-mindedness between us. But you are a psychologist, is that?
But now I'm basically a teacher, but I'm actually a very, very curious teacher. So I'm a biology teacher by training. I've been in schools for 25 years. I've been an acting head teacher. I've been a Senko. But actually I'm passionate about biology, and I've followed the science for years and years and years. And all the time in schools, I've been thinking we need to take another look at this. We need to talk to young people and their parents about their brains in a different way, in a much more positive and inspirational way than we end up in kind of conversations that are in cul-de-sacs as people get locked in to particular ways of thinking. So that kind of inspired me to generate lots of material to work as a Senko with people that were really struggling. And then I thought, actually, when the opportunity came to take voluntary redundancy a couple of years ago, I said to my wife, I want to do this, and you can imagine her expression. I said, we're going to do it anyway, let's have a go. And it's gone all right so far. We've got things like a global pandemic to deal with, but so far, so good.
So just for those who don't know what Senko is, can you just explain?
Yeah, of course. So in a school, schools are full of acronyms, aren't they? So Special Educational Needs Coordinator. So responsible for supporting the students that struggle most with their learning to make progress, and work with their families to make sure that those children are okay.
And in preparation for this interview, I was saying to you that up until now I've actually been working through some negative mindsets, and the last negative mindset that I covered was it's not my fault, and I talked about Julian Rotter and locus of control. And fundamentally, if you didn't see it, it was just saying there are two Julian Rotter wrote a paper saying there are two basic ways of thinking. His critics said he was too extreme, but I say yes or no to that, but the guy had a point. And basically external locus control says it's not my fault, I'm where I am today because of the external thing that happened to me, where internal thinkers will say I'm where I am today because of the choices that I made. And I went into detail about the choice box. But the next one, and it really fits here, is a negative mindset where we, and particularly in education, students can think it is just too hard. And when I heard you present for Mike, you talked, and I've got a quote here, anxiety is an epidemic in school, and that negative mindset, it's just too hard, contributes to that. Can you say more of your understanding of where those gaps are and why this happens?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So that Julian Rotter stuff and all of the things that you've got that you've been talking about in your show, they kind of stem from a process of analysis called metacognitive skills. So the ability of the brain to think about its own operation, which is a kind of special skill we've got as a species. Squirrels don't do it very well, nor do dogs, but we're able to put our own thinking at the center of our thinking. And so the issue that lots of young people face in schools and lots of people face is they get stuck in a particular way of thinking about themselves, which actually, when you look at the way the brain works, that's not how the brain works. The brain constantly throws up predictions and checks to see whether those predictions are right or not. But at the level of us, we get stuck, we confuse opinions, we make them into facts, and we end up listening to a set of scripts and responses that our brain generates, and we believe them to be true, and then we go and talk to the rest of the world about that and end up concreting ourselves in to a kind of space of being.
So you were talking about being kind and curious, and I think what you're saying there is with our curiosity we can create things that are not true, and if we don't challenge them, so the belief system, it is too hard, that could be a complete lie that a student is telling themselves. They then gather evidence to support it, and like you say, they turn it into a fact. How can they counter that?
So I think the best place to start is to stand back. I mean, at the core of our business is we look into the brain, what neuroscience and psychology are telling us, and now we've got the ability to meld those two. So we not only have got the psychology, but we've got the neuroscience behind it. So you stand back from the brain and you realise, and this is a stunning a bit of science, that what the self is, that I that is telling itself that story, is a model the brain builds of its own operation. So every morning when we wake up, that experience of grogginess that we have, that sleep inertia, the connections across our brain, the circuits are connecting up, building the new model of the brain's experiences for today. That model has been updated by yesterday's experiences. It's got this kind of similarity because it's relying on memory and lots of shared experiences the brain has had. But that model runs about a third of a second behind what the brain's actually doing. And so stand back when you're listening to that voice that tells you it's too hard. That is a circuit in your brain that is saying, actually, I don't really want to do that right now. I don't want to expend that energy. I don't want to experience that struggle. Our brain is a collection of a team of rivals, of circuits that are often in an argument with each other. They evolved at different times to do different jobs. So some circuits are about curiosity and newness, because that kept our ancestors moving forward, finding food, finding new lands, etc. Equally, there are circuits that keep us safe and protected, and they end up in a war across our brain. So there is no boss circuit that makes a decision, but there are, at the front of our brain, just behind our forehead, goes in about the length of a thumb, the prefrontal cortex is the place where we can plan and manage and be more strategic about our responses and make choices about which thoughts we allow to run.
Yeah, so the thing is, I think anxiety is actually good in a way, because we need to be anxious to prepare for danger of some sort. And I think we've talked about, and it's something I've talked about, and I know you spoke about it, is the gap of uncertainty. If it's too large, then the anxiety becomes overwhelming and unmanageable, which then goes into negative stress rather than positive stress.
Yeah, exactly. And there's a real similarity physiologically between anxiety and excitement, as you say. But the interesting thing is, when the brain experiences uncertainty, so it's trying to make predictions the entire time so it can avoid problems. When it experiences uncertainty, a situation it hasn't experienced before, so it hasn't got predictions available, we experience uncertainty and we feel that as anxiety. That is normal. Any brain in any new situation will feel nervous. People going back to work from a Sunday evening to a Monday will feel more nervous than they did on the Sunday, because their brain is having to gear up with much more prediction. Now, living in this moment of complexity where we've got a pandemic, the level of uncertainty is even larger. The orders of magnitude of uncertainty in the 21st century are enormous anyway for a human brain. That's one of the reasons there's an epidemic of anxiety. People are misunderstanding, misdiagnosing anxiety. There are people that are suffering enormously with huge levels of anxiety, and that has become a clinical issue for them, because those circuits have got so strong, because they've been exercised so much, that they're limiting people's opportunities and experience. But per se, anxiety is the human brain saying, something's changing in the environment. Now, wind time back, 3 million years ago, oh, something's changing in the environment, is what is that noise in the grass? Is that a predator? Actually, I'm just going to work on the basis it is, because I'm more likely to survive if I work on that basis. Whereas if I assume it isn't and happily dance off into the flower meadow, I'm going to get eaten. And so the cave people that were joyful and happy tended to get eaten, and the ones that were nervous and anxious tended to remain safe. And therefore we've evolved in that way. So we have got this brain that will spot change, we feel that as anxiety, and we've got to normalize that initial response. If we don't, it billows up and we end up in a kind of whack-a-mole situation in our brain where anxiety is in every direction.
Yes, and what I like, and we're going to say more about it in the second half, is how the brain picks up every day and almost starts again. But we had 90% of the conversations we had today are the same conversations that we had yesterday. And so maybe look at some of the strategies as to actually create a new, healthier way of thinking. And I think normalising anxiety more rather than think, it's like stress, isn't it? Some people think stress is a definite no-no. Well, it isn't. It's actually important. Stay with me and we can pick this up after the break. So yeah, we'll see you in just a moment. Thank you.